So, what we're going to talk about today is consciousness, and really just understanding the different levels and different degrees of consciousness that we're traveling upon. So, if you're gonna vibe with my conversation, by and large, if you're gonna roll with the the talks that I have, you're really trying to transcend this 3D and 4D conditioned, limited, structured state of consciousness that the world kind of is operating on now because of this system that we're currently living in, right? So my consciousness, or my conversation, is really trying to access that 5D and 6D level of consciousness, which allows one access, to the deeper realms of being, into the different dimensional states of being, right? And so, to the brothers and sisters, this might sound, a different way or a certain type of way, but really 3D consciousness, right? 3D, 4D consciousness is really the physical level of consciousness, what people can see, hear, feel, taste, and touch, that level and degree of reality that the senses interact with, right? And so the senses perceive a certain level of reality, and then the mind takes that level of reality, has existence in and of itself, and does not understand that there are other levels of experience, there are other levels of reality to experience because of the cultural condition that we live in, right? But melanated brothers and sisters, melanated cultures and traditions, melanated nations have always instituted ways in which we can access the 5D and 6D levels of consciousness. You understand? These spiritual traditions that we have, these spiritual traditions that we're trying to get back to, gave us the tools so we can communicate, not only communicate with that level of consciousness, but actually bring information from that realm into the physical realm, into this 4D, 3D level of consciousness to help and benefit us. This is the point, right? So those of us that are, strictly limited to what the senses, to information that the senses give us, in that whole historical context, we won't really have a deeper holistic understanding of the reality that we live in, because at all points in time, we are consistently living in a multi-dimensional, multi-leveled state of consciousness, right? But the consciousness of the 3D and the 4D brothers and sisters is only acknowledging and understanding the 4D and 3D level of consciousness. So to say that a plant, has this healing ability within it, sounds awkward to the person that's traveling on a 3D level of consciousness, the 4D level of consciousness, because they're just looking for the effect, and they're not understanding that the plant has an essence. The plant has a way of being about it that needs to be paid attention to and respected if we are to interact with it in a healing manner, right? And we need to, and then there are certain ways of approaching the plant, certain times to approach the plant in order to get the most healing benefit from it. This doesn't sound like rational to a person traveling on a 3D level of consciousness, but it is the way you interact with the world. Like, we have to understand that the world has, everything has consciousness, everything has its way of expression and being, and we must respect that. And melanated brothers and sisters understood that. That is why we were able to exist in that way. That is why we were able to create great civilizations, because when you're in the fifth dimensional level of consciousness, you're able to understand the patterns that make up the fourth and third dimensional level of consciousness, right? And so you can clear the brothers and sisters and the beings on the fifth and sixth dimensional levels. They're able to give us information about this reality that we couldn't intuit otherwise, right? So a good example that I like to bring up is, and that's a modern day respected scientist, is George Washington Carver, right? George Washington Carver, God, blessings to the ancestor. I mean, he had kind of an interesting life, but because of his life, his life was geared in such a way that he was able to access these levels of consciousness within him because he didn't have distractions. We're not going to get into why he didn't have distractions, but he didn't have distractions. And because of that, he was able to get information that most of us are not privy to, because he was able to focus his mind to see, you know, other realities that we couldn't see. Just the statement that the plants talk to him is enough to let you know that there is a different level of consciousness that he was on. But that is an African way, that is a melanated way of being. And through discipline, through meditation, through ritual, through acknowledging the paths of our ancestors, we too can get to a space where there is something in reality that we are in communication with that can talk to us at the same time. And we can get information from these different dimensions in order to help us out with the current world that we're in. And in all honesty, if we want to transcend the situations and the conditions that we're in, we are going to need help from other brothers and sisters on these different levels and dimensions of consciousnness. Our ancestors, we need to call out and speak to our ancestors to give us the guidance and assistance that we need. Ashe.